Hello, this is a short video about natural childbirth, and it's not meant to be in any kind of way invalidating to anybody else's choices around giving birth in a hospital or having surgical birth. It is in no way discussing anybody else's choices. It's just me talking about my choices and why I chose to give birth the way I did. So I preface this because earlier in my life, after giving childbirth with no medication and twice at home, completely unassisted by any type of midwife or doula or anybody else, I heard some of my close friends who were doctors and nurses and in the medical field who told me that my story invalidated their story. And yesterday it came to my awareness with the Pluto and Saturn conjunction that's occurring currently, that it's something that women fear and have a lot of uncertainty about, and I feel compelled to share my story on this. So when I first had a baby, I was 24 years old, and when I found out I was pregnant, I was working in a hospital. I worked in hospitals for about 7 years. So at that point, it had been about 3 years in working in hospitals in the military. And I knew the procedures and I knew everything they were going to do. I was very well versed on hospital procedure. And I knew that I didn't want to do that. Even at the time, I was 23 years old, pregnant, and I knew I did not want to do that. So I armed myself with education, and every single day after work, I went to the bookstore and I was on the internet searching for other women's stories and instructional manuals and information for doing your own prenatal care and for giving birth alone at home. I found a website called Unassisted or Unassisted Childbirth, Emancipated Childbirth. I can't find the website anymore, but it was called Emancipated Childbirth. And it went through giving all of the, possibilities, the common things that happen, herbs to use. Also, there was a book by Susan Weed called Wise Woman Herbal for the Childbearing Years. That book I used all through my childbearing up until the time I started following fertility awareness method to make sure that I don't get pregnant anymore. I lived by that book by Susan Weed. So those were the reasons in the beginning when I first got pregnant that made me not want to go to a hospital and gave me the idea that I could do birth at home through research, reading about how in times before the hospital, it became like a medical procedure or a medical emergency, or women started to schedule their planning to have the cesarean section for various different reasons. Again, no kind of judgment on that. But before those times, women were surrounded by other women and gave birth with the support of other women there. And it was a different thing. And so I educated myself, and the first time I had a baby, it was amazing and beautiful, and it hurt just during the point of what's called the ring of fire. So when I say hurt, I mean there was a point that I thought for sure I'm going to break in half. But before that point, it was, I describe the sensations of giving birth like if very, very powerful undulations of the spine, and the body is moving, and you can actually see the belly ripple, and you can see the contractions along with feeling the contractions. So there's a couple of herbs that I was using very heavily, and that's red raspberry leaf and nettles. So I was making an infusion with that tea from the time I was 28 weeks pregnant and drinking it very heavily. And those two herbs are tonifying to the uterus, so that when you have the contractions, the uterus is very productive, that it'll have productive contractions. So it hurts like a cramp, like a bad cramp, like you have to go to the bathroom, and to go to the bathroom to pass stool. It's not like you have to pee. It's like you feel like you really have to go poop. And it's a contraction like that, and it's strong, and then they come faster and faster. So the thing about the tonifying the uterus is that now your uterus as a muscle is able to contract symmetrically. So if you imagine the uterus, and this is also helpful for when we have periods, because what happens is, imagine this is the uterus and it wants to, or this is a pretty big uterus, it's, a little smaller, that it's doing the monthly contraction to expel your egg that didn't get fertilized, that it can, kind of like have this dysrhythmia. And so when you get it to contract with a synergistic contraction, then there's less needed. There's less of those needed. So they're able to be full and complete. And then, they're more effective. So I studied about that, and I had been working with doing contracting my uterus on my own. So what at that time I was calling kegels. Now there's another book that I will share in the comments area. There's this other book that it's the tantric arts for women, and there's all these different variations of movements that you would do to tone and articulate the different areas of your regenerative organs. So I did all of that, and then when it came time to giving birth, I felt very sure of myself. I had a sense of certainty. I did not watch any of those emergency room birth stories on the Discovery Channel. I refused to watch them. When people were like, oh, you need to watch this, I just refused. I was like, no, I don't need to watch that. I knew that I didn't want it in my mind that this was going to be painful and harmful and treacherous. I did train, so I kept my physical fitness up, because in my mind I was training for a marathon, which was going to be giving birth. And I stayed very physically fit. And then when it came time to give birth, I listened to my body. I did everything that I wanted to do. I got in all the positions that I wanted to be in, moved the way I wanted to. I was not tied to any ropes and strings and stirrups and the thing that they will stick in you so you can pee. I can't remember the name of that thing, where they put it into your urethra, so that I can't remember the name of that thing. But there's so many things that you don't get to have freedom of movement in your body, which during birth, just like during a really heavy period that you're having cramps and you need to be in different positions. Like sometimes you just want to curl into a letter C. Sometimes you need to squat. And if you have things attached to you, it makes everything more difficult. So I had none of that. I was completely free to move however I wanted to move. And I gave birth in a squatting position where my feet were on the floor, my knees were up, and I caught the baby like this. And she came out and she was fine, and I knew what to do. So I cleaned her off. I actually sucked on her nose with my mouth to make sure her airway passage was clear. So did a little suck on her nose, and I looked in her mouth and made sure that everything was clear. And then I brought her to nurse so that she could latch on, and then we could get the contractions to let the placenta come out. And that everything went fine, and I had a baby at home. And then the second baby I had with a midwife in a hospital, and I just wrote because I was in the military on a small island, and there my partner at the time was not interested in me having a baby the way I did before. So we compromised, and I did go into the hospital with a 4-page birth plan that The midwife that I had was very good about making sure that every single instruction that I wrote was followed to the T. There was no talking aloud in my birthing room. I had candles, I had my own music, I wore my own clothes, I had no strings attached to me, cords, catheter. That's the thing that sucks your urine out. I had no catheter, I had no checks. I didn't want to be getting the check where they need to check the cervix, nothing. It's strictly stated that I was there for in case of an emergency, but otherwise, just to leave me alone. There was no students allowed. It was, I was very strict on all the rules and they were followed perfectly. And at that birth, I had also one contraction that I felt like I was going to die. And so when I say that, this is what inspired me to do the videos, because yesterday when I mentioned the Pluto-Saturn conjunction and I was describing what that feels like in the body, and I described it as giving birth, where you feel like the contractions are, squeezing you so hard and your body is like cracking open, and it's such a weird, trippy feeling in the mind, feeling the senses of what's happening in the body, feeling like you're splitting open. And then there's just so much drugs going through your body. Your body naturally gives you drugs to go through this portal of becoming a mother and birthing another human into the world. So I love that. I love being pregnant. I love giving birth. The hardest part is actually raising the kids for, who knows how long, I guess forever, because you're a mom now and you're raising the kids and then they grow up, but you always have kids. And I feel like that's the, the pregnancy and birth are the easy part in my perspective, for me. So another topic for another time on raising children. But the reason I'm saying I like childbirth is because of the amount of pain and the pain that has a purpose. It's not like when you have a tooth infection and it just hurts for no reason. It's the pain that it's productive pain. And it's something that I feel like connects us to our ancestors and to all other women who have done this before us. And that you go into this birthing portal where it's like all the support of your ancestors and all the ancestors. It's not just yours. It's like all the grandmothers from 10,000 of years, and it's big energy that comes into the room. At least I felt that it was. And I felt held and supported, and it hurt like hell, and I was able to breathe through it and let my body crack open. And a part of me dies every time I give birth, and I'm giving birth to a new person myself. I'm birthing a new me as well, which I've heard women say, and people, men too, that their experiences on ayahuasca and peyote and some other ceremonial uses of plant medicine have given them the same experience that I can recollect from my childbirth experiences. So it might be a similar thing, except I don't think the pain is quite the same, like the physical sensations of having your insides stretching and opening. And another thing I want to mention about that is that afterwards, and now the baby is out and I never had any tears or rips or cuts, my cervix, my whole yoni, every part of my regenerative organs felt stronger, more, just overall felt more rejuvenated every time I gave birth. They felt healthier and stronger. And, I've only had good experiences with childbirth. And I think partially it's because of my mind and because of all the research that I do and that I did during those times, and then the aftercare. So after the baby's born, the last child I had, I did all the prenatal care myself too. I didn't go to any, I went to one appointment because my partner wanted to find out the sex of the child. So I did go, and he, he paid for it. He wanted to have the ultrasound. It was like $250 he just wanted to find out the sex of the baby. But besides that, I did all my own prenatal care and had the baby at home in a birthing pool. And then afterwards, I stayed in bed. Like, I laid in a rejuvenative yoga posture supported by pillows for 40 days. And I just studied and read and nursed the baby and had a pot of bone broth with vegetables. And I'm vegan, but I did use bone broth because in Chinese medicine and in Ayurveda, that's one of the best ways to get healthy milk. The baby was really healthy. It helped both of our immune systems and rebuild tissue. So I was all about the bone broth for 40 days. And rebuilding myself and my strength internally. And I had no postpartum depression, I think, because of being able to just lay down and rest. And obviously, during the pregnancy, I made extra money through my creative endeavors and my artistic talents and skills. And I saved up money, and so that I could lay down for 40 days. And I had already paid my bills in advance. That was out of the way. So grateful for that. But I think the key point that I want to share in this video is that the reason that I love giving childbirth has something to do with trusting my body, listening to the signs of what's happening, listening to what my body is saying, and trusting that everything is going how it should be going. And when I say I enjoy the pain, it was because of the fact that it's like you can't get out of it. When I can't get out of pain, what I learned was to go fully into it, like get more into how much it, like, and make the sounds that go along with what I was feeling and sensing, and then holding my body open in weird ways and like stretching and moving however I wanted to move. And like, it was very empowering. And to this day, the memory of going through those experiences, like, I know that there is absolutely nothing that I cannot do. One more thing I want to share here is that when I was about 19, I got taken out to sea by a dumb thing that I did by climbing down a cliff. And I didn't know I was from Arizona, and I came to San Diego on a trip by myself when I was 18. And I got taken out to sea, and I was out for about 4 hours and couldn't get back in. I thought I was going to die. I really did. It was sunset, the sun was going down and nobody could hear me, and I was getting further and further away, and just decided to give up, and I surrendered. Getting into a real state of surrender is something that you cannot fake. You can't think your way into surrendering. It's just something that happens when you finally give up, when it's like, I'm going to die. That's it. And I stopped fighting. I stopped trying to figure anything out about how am I going to get back to shore. And I remember just staring down at the waves, at the water, and somehow, by me relaxing and surrendering, I started to be carried by the waves closer into shore. And that experience was what helped me through the first time giving birth, that I was able to remember that feeling of actually surrendering to the waves. And contractions are a lot like waves. You can feel them build, and then they reach a crescendo, and then they come back down. So being able to, ride that in my physical body with the memory of the experience in the ocean. So I think people who are surfers probably have access to that feeling of riding a wave, and most likely they have gotten too far out and had the experience also of like, maybe I'm going to die today. And then and the sense of surrendering. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I just want to, I completely respect everybody's choices for how they chose to give birth. And I'm not saying that my way is better than anybody else's. Just want to put that out there before, if anybody has a comment about something like that. I'm also, this is not an invitation also to hear everybody's birth story, because if you're inspired to do a video telling about your birth story, that's wonderful. And, I definitely recommend doing that, because there's medicine in telling your story, whatever the story is. So yes, thank you so much for watching the video, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.